Then the next of the condition is Mutratita. Mutratita is obviously the neurogenic bladder, where the neurological control of the bladder is lost, and we now categorize them into the automatic and autonomic and overflowing incontinence conditions, where there is a obvious neurological pathology. In that condition, the patient would have a incontinence. The patient would not be able to pass the urine by himself. Only when there is an external pressure given, it could be that the urine may be passed out. And in all these neurological conditions, I may not be able to give you a standard protocol of the treatment. The important is we have to ensure that the bladder is emptied, either with a Foley's catheter or condom catheter, depending upon the patient's condition. And whatever the neurological condition, that needs to be treated. It could be a spinal injury, it could be this demyelinating disorder, or so on. And that needs to be treated, and there is no, I won't suggest any specific line of the treatment for such conditions. And the only issue is we have to identify them and then ensure that the bladder is emptied, either with the indwelling catheter or a suprapubic catheter, or maybe a condom catheter, depending upon the patient's condition as such. Next of the condition is the Mutra Jatara or bladder neck dysfunction. And the bladder neck dysfunction is a situation where there is a tendency for the stagnation of the urine, because the direct contraction of the detrusor muscle and the trigone, they are not really synchronized. Asynchronization, non-synchronization of these two components of the micturition would be the real causes as such, and hence when the bladder contracts, the neck doesn't open, and hence the patient would be straining, but the urine may not be passed through properly. And these are now have to be identified as separate from the prostatic hypertrophy. And in such conditions, again, if at all a surgical intervention is done, most of the times after the surgery, the patient would have a persisting symptoms, and it will be always a troublesome condition. And the clinical symptoms will be, of course, a slow flow, and the post-vital residual volume always is progressively increasing, and that could be a chronic dilatation of the bladder. Patient may have a huge dilatation of the bladder, and typically in uroflowmetry you can see small waves, very short, low pressure waves occurring frequently, and even the micturitory wave is very low as such. Main prescription would be in such conditions would be Ecambivir and Ashwagandha Rista as such, and Niruhapastik would be the other choice which would be preferable, considering this as a Vata Prakopaja Vyati. Of course, if the quantity of end residual volume is more than 200 ml, intervention is required. Intervention, either it could be a catheterization or rarely a TURP. So catheterization is a better option than surgical intervention in such conditions. At times, once you have catheterized the patient and been given this treatment for 2 or 3 weeks, or maybe at times a month or so, if you remove the catheter, the patient may regain the functions and may have normal flow of the urine. So we may try that. Niruhapastik given for a week or so, and then given Ecambivir and Ashwagandha Rista for 2 or 3 weeks. Then again remove the catheter. A good number of patients would be able to pass the urine normally, and the functions can again regain significantly. Then comes the Mutra Utsanga, where there is a urethral stricture, where there is an obstruction in the Nala or the Mani. Nale Manovaya Sudehina Mutram Pravuttam Sajjeta, where there is a obstruction at that condition. And this being a mechanical pathology, it will be difficult to manage with the medical conditions. Of course, stricture now has become more common in the present days conditions, and the incidence is quite high, more commonly in older men, and often could be a complication of a sexually transmitted disorder. The causes could be either it could be idiopathic, as idiopathic where the causes are really not known, or another group is iatrogenic. Most of the times the stricture would be a complication produced due to any of the medical intervention, and the location of the stricture could be throughout anywhere, either in the bulbar or maybe in the any other areas of the urethra, that we may have these strictures in many conditions of this iatrogenic. So Most of the times the strictures are contributed by the physicians who are treating with. In a typical stricture, if you do a uroflowmetry, you can see that difference in the normal uroflowmetry will be dumbbell shaped flow chart, whereas a stricture uroflowmetry would be a flattened surface. The patient would have a moderate flow and then the same flow would be continuing for a long duration and then it steadies. A ureterogram can show you the dilatation. So that's about the strictures which are now becoming somewhat more common due to the intervention. Treatment for the stricture would be a urethral dilatation is necessary. Even Sushruta has suggested the same in a Niruddha Prakasha Vyadhi. The procedure is described where the urethra can be dilated with the dilator, and Sushruta has suggested the dilatation to be done once in 3 days, but now we can do the dilatation in a single day. And the other option is urethrotomy surgery. Even that's also suggested by Sushruta. If the dilatation fails, Sushruta has suggested Bhitva va sevani mukva subjekshadva achareta. Urethrotomy is suggested, or the other options are set catheterization or uretroplasty. Virtually, the scope for a medical management in these conditions of urethral stricture are very low, and I would always suggest a urethral stricture patient as a primary surgical condition as such. There will be very little or no scope for medical management. Then comes the Mutra Granthi. Mutra Granthi is different from the Mutra Stela in terms of the clinical presentation of a relatively acute onset, Jayate Sahasayasya, whereas Mutra Stela is a chronic condition and it will be painful, Vedanavana. That pain and a rapid course is a critical suggestive of a prostatitis, inflammatory pathology, or maybe the tumors of the bladder neck. Prostatitis is more common in the younger age, particularly in the sexually active age group, and the diseases could be transmitted due to the sexual activity, and they are again categorized into acute bacterial or chronic bacterial or just a chronic, simple chronic metabolic pathology where there could be either inflammatory or non-inflammatory. This is how it is categorized. The only difference is about the clinical presentation. In an acute bacterial, you will have more toxic clinical symptoms, whereas in the chronic type, you may not have the inflammatory symptoms significantly. The clinical presentation will be a painful micturition, occasionally blood in the urine, a pain in the whole perineal area or maybe in the rectum, pain being radiating to the middle aspect of the thigh also is characteristic. Fever, malaise, the discharges in the urethra, painful ejaculation or sexual dysfunction, these are the common clinical symptoms of the prostatitis. In that condition, I would consider them as a Pittaja Mutra Krichra, and my prescription usually would be Chandraprabha Gandhakara and Chandanasava in case of that Mutra Granthi because of the Pittaja Lakshanas as such. Then Mutra Shukra is mentioned by Sushruta, where there is a direct relationship with the sexual activity, where the person who goes for the sexual activity when the patient has an urge for micturition is considered as a cause, and that results in accumulation of excretion of the semen in the urine. That semen in the urine is due to a reverse ejaculation. That ejaculation may be in the reverse direction, and in all such conditions it is quite important to rule out the venereal disorders. Many times a pus also could be presented in that condition. So a reverse ejaculation or the ejaculation into the bladder instead of in the distal side is a primary surgical condition and could be a cause for sterility if at all it is produced in a younger age. And I don't think that there could be any medical management for that condition. It's a structural pathology and it requires a surgical intervention. Then comes the Ushnamata. Ushnamata is obviously a typical presentation of urinary tract infections. In the present day situation, it's exactly the lower urinary tract infection symptoms where the patient would have typical either Pittaja or Kapaja Mutra Krichra Lakshanas. And the same treatment which we have referred to, either Chandraprabha Gandhakara, Chandanasava or Bhushirasa would be the usual prescription as such. Then Mutra Kritsha are the UTI presentations, urinary tract presentations, which we have already referred to when we discussed about the urinary tract infection. So it's a repetition of the same, but because in the context of Mutraghata, we refer to this issue. Mutravakasada is the next of that Mutraghata, where the patient would have a abnormal sedimentation in the urine, where it could be like a crystallization of phosphates or the other substances, where it could be the sedimentation which could be presented at the area where the patient has passed the urine could be either Rochana Churna Samipam, either it could be like a Gorochana Churna or maybe Shankha Churna Samipam, either yellowish or whitish crystals are seen at the area where the patient has passed the urine. That's exactly what you see in case of the phosphaturia or occasionally cystinuria or so metabolic pathology. Now that's about the Mutraghata mentioned by Sushruta. And the same image which I have just shown you in the beginning, the one which is established in 2019, where the LUTS causes are identified. The important point which I would like to stress upon is that there is a huge clinical similarity between the Vata Pingalic and Detrusor underactivity and the Mutra stela and the benign prostatic hypertrophy, Vata Basti with the overactive bladder conditions, and the Mutra Tita with the neurogenic bladder conditions, or Mutra Jatara also will be presenting with the neurogenic bladder conditions, and Mutroksanga with the urethral strictures, and Mutra Sanshaya is with the chronic pelvic pain syndrome, or which we consider now, where there would be the all that set of complications which are related to the urinary micturition, and you will have that pain as a presentation. Bladder tumor could be the Mutra Granthi, bladder tumor, or prostatitis could be the Mutra Granthi. Ushnavata is Ushnavata as well as Mutra Shukra. They could be presenting with the urinary tract infections as one of the LUTS. Mutravakasada among the other metabolic pathologies. Now the important is the same which is established in 2019 is what's mentioned by Sushruta 5000 years back, and there's a huge similarity. That's what we have to claim, like where Ayurvedic literature is quite rich enough, and majority of those approaches which we consider as very recent and modern, they are mentioned in the text. The last part in the disease portions would be the glomerular and tubular lesions, where there would be usually what we consider as nephrologic pathology. These are considered as prameha. Of course, we have discussed about the prameha, some aspects of the prameha in a previous session where we have discussed about diabetes mellitus and related issues. But certain of those facts which are otherwise important, as in case of the prameha, are the prameha would be an abnormality where there is an abnormality of a formation of the urine, and that formation of the urine abnormality could be either there is an abnormal excretion of the contents, abnormal contents, Medascha Mamsamsa Sharirajanta Kledam Kapaha Bastigata Pradushya Karoti Mehan Samudirnam Usnehi Taneva Pittam Pradushya. So one is there could be a passive excretion as in case of the glomerular pathology, or Dosheshu Avakrisha Dhatum Sandushya Mehan Krute Anilascha. There could be an abnormality of either the spontaneous expulsion of the doshas, or there is an abnormality of the reabsorption of the doshas. That could be the tubular pathologies. So the renal disorders, chronic renal disorders, could be of glomerular origin, which is described in the first half of the shloka, and then the tubular pathologies in the second half of the shloka as such. And in all these causes of the prameha, the major cause is the food habits, asya sukam and swapna sukam, like then food about the dini gramyam payamsi namana panam budavaitu sanja prameha hetu. So the basically it's the lifestyle disorder. Lifestyle is a basic cause for the diseases according to prameha. Description of the prameha, of course, we have referred to that in the previous sessions, like 20 varieties of the prameha, and to a certain extent they can be compared as the diabetes insipidus, mellitus, and so on. The most important part which we discuss would be the madhumeha. I think already we have discussed that earlier. I don't consider madhumeha as diabetes. Madhumeha is really the end stage renal failure. The diabetes mellitus is really ikshameha, which we have referred to that in the previous sessions. So we'll come to that part, the Madhumeha. Madhumeha is exactly the description of a situation where all the other, any of the other pathologies, varieties of the Prameha may end up in a end state, and that's the Madhumehatvam Ayanti. So, of course, though in all your routine colloquial language, Madhumeha is equated to diabetes mellitus, from our technical point of view, Madhumeha refers to the renal injury or renal pathologies. And that's the end stage condition where all the other basic pathologies, whether it is primarily the renal pathology or a cardiovascular pathology, or it could be a simple abnormality of the hypertension, circulatory abnormality, at the end it may impact the renal functions, and this would be all those doshas throughout the body. Vapuhu, Kleda, Svedo, Medo, Rasa, Amisham, which may involve any of the other dhatus of the body. At the end, it may result in Bastim Ashritya Kurute. When they result in the involvement of the Basti, it produces the Prameha. Now, the Prameha, the end renal failure, of course, the older terminology was renal failure and categorized as acute and chronic. But now the terminology has been changed. Now you have a acute kidney injury and a chronic renal failure. These are the two terms. Now, anyway, the important pathological stages or pathological varieties of this could be either there could be Dhatukshaya, there could be a Dhatukshaya where the medullary tissue of the kidney, parenchymal tissue of the kidney is affected, and hence the kidney either has become constricted or parenchymal tissue is destroyed. Hence, there could be a parenchymal disorder presenting with the Prameha, Madhumeha. So, Madhumeha, Madhusam Jayate Sakilatala, one is a Krubde Dhatukshayat Vayav. Either it could be the Dhatukshayat or Dosharata Prathe Atava. If there is an obstruction pathology and that obstruction has resulted in a dilation, as in case of the polycystic kidney conditions, these are the two images, ultrasonography showing a constricted kidney with parenchymal disorder and a dilated these calyces, as in case of the hydronephrosis or polycystic kidney conditions, the Prameha could be produced. So, two sets of the primary pathologies are described as the causes, and then of course they will result in Krichasadhyata, they poor prognosis. Then the next of the causes for the Prameha, Madhumeha could be Jata Pramehi Madhumehinova, a genetic congenital pathology which can produce the disease, as in case of the polycystic kidney resulting in the renal failure. So, grossly, all the renal failure may be categorized under these three heads, like that there could be a parenchymal pathology, or there could be an obstructive pathology, or there could be a genetic or congenital pathology, and these are described by Sushruta clearly. Now, from the current approach point of view, the renal failures or renal injuries, they are now named as either acute kidney injury and a chronic renal failure. This terminology has been changed from a acute renal failure to chronic renal failure because of the possible outcome in case of acute kidney injury now. Anyway, for the acute renal injuries, acute kidney injuries, the causes could be many. Important is there could be a huge number of causes. The important could be perirenal. Among those perirenal, where the blood flow to the kidney could be either reduced due to a cardiac pathology of any sort, patient with a shock, dehydration, or it could be like a patient with an other pathology like cirrhosis or splanchnic pathologies, a obstruction, renal artery stenosis. These could be one major causes, and one of the other important causes are drugs. Among the drugs, the most common and quite significant is NSAIDs, non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, which are quite frequently used in the clinical practice, and many times they are also dispensed without prescription as over-the-counter products. They are considered as the one. They are really the important causes for the kidney injuries. And then antihypertensive drugs also can produce the kidney injuries, as acute kidney injuries could occur. Acute kidney injury also could occur due to, again, the drugs. Again, the drugs could be the same, NSAIDs, as well as you have a large number of nephrotoxic drugs. Majority of the drugs which we now use are nephrotoxic drugs. In addition to that, there could be a damage to the glomerular pathology, as in case of the glomerulonephritis, tubular disorders, either ischemia or the abnormality related to the metabolism, or it could be the vascular diseases where the vein could be thrombosed, or it could also be produced due to the obstructive pathology like calculi, malignancy, prosthetic hypertrophy, erectile strictures. All said and done, the most important cause for the acute kidney injury would be the drugs, either NSAIDs or other medicines which are used, as well as the dietary factors. Now, the difference between the pre-renal and the renal pathologies are, there is not much of a significant issue from our clinical point of view, but the important is in a pre-renal pathology, usually the creatinine and nitrogen ratio would be less than 20, whereas in a renal pathology it will be higher. Renal functions are affected significantly, and the urinary sodium would be more in case of the renal pathology, whereas it will be lesser in a acute kidney injury. From the clinical identification point of view, in a acute kidney injury, in addition to the urinary output, symptoms related to the reduced urinary output, you may have these clinical signs, peripheral vascular signs, where there could be purpura, which could be either palpable or a reddish discoloration, which could be seen over lips. These are important because many times patient may not have other clinical evidences. It could be just reduced urinary output and development of these clinical signs, which should be carefully identified, and you have to identify the acute kidney injury. Incidence of that acute kidney injury and then renal pathology, renal failure, is increasing very rapidly every year. The reasons are, now, the men with the diabetes, it's increasing very rapidly. Even men without diabetes also, it's increasing very rapidly globally throughout. And the reasons could be the diet and the exercise. Of course, we will come to that part. In common for both acute as well as chronic renal injury, the common causes as such. Now, in a patient of acute kidney injury, the stress always is given for prevention than really the management. So, important is to identify the risk patients, like a patient in a shock or cardiac failure, etc. The effective management is necessary. So, virtually not much of a scope for Ayurvedic treatment in that condition. It needs a different setup. And the hydration has to be maintained. If necessary, you may have to, and if the patient is on any of these nephrotoxic drugs, the dosage of the nephrotoxic drugs are to be managed. So, scope for a basic Ayurvedic treatment in acute kidney injury is comparatively lesser. Most of the times, these patients require an intense treatment and emergency treatment. If at all we get an opportunity, I would be prescribing Punarna and Punarnasara. But the number of such patients whom we treat with only Ayurvedic drugs are comparatively lesser. But if at all in the hospital setup, we do manage such patients with some combined therapy like hydration or maybe certain diuretic drugs, as such would be the other prescription in case of the acute kidney injury. Whereas chronic kidney disease or a chronic renal failure is defined as a kidney damage which is persisting more than 3 months, with an evidence, structural or functional evidence of the disease is the important identification, or where there is a pathological abnormality seen, or glomerular filtration rate is lesser than 6 ml. Glomerular filtration rate can be calculated by the investigations, and if it is less than 6 ml, let's consider as a chronic renal failure. From the clinical point of view, the chronic renal failure, the common causes, these are all the results of some survey established, the publications from authentic sources, where a survey done mainly in Western countries. This is not from India, of course the data is not from India, it's from the West European countries that you have this survey, but the results can be somewhat worse than this in our setup. The majority of in children, potential nephrotoxic drugs being given in children by the primary care physician is quite high, like around 71% as such, when the child has a kidney evidence, chronic or acute kidney evidence in pediatric practice. The other, even in the other drugs, the important among those common drugs which are known to produce the renal damage or which we call as the checkpoint inhibitors, proton pump inhibitors which are prescribed regularly or which are consumed quite regularly with the patients who have hyperacidity or gastric irritation symptoms, and you have plenty of patients who consume these proton pump inhibitors by themselves. That's also one of the very common cause for the acute kidney injury as such. In addition to that, the other well-established causes for the acute kidney injury are alcohol, bed meat, carbonated beverages like Oliver, Coca-Cola, Sprite and so on, dairy products where you have a preservative added, artificial sweeteners, and then any of the substance where there is a preservative added, though our regulating authorities may consider give a label that the food is safer, none of those preservatives are absolutely safe, and every preservative would have some impact on the kidney which may not be identified, and we consider some safe limit, but those limits, safe limit is again a bit of issues about the safe limit. I will come to that part. Like when we say a safe limit, that may not be really safe as such. Of course, smoking is well known to be a cause for the kidney. Table salts, quantity of the salt consumed also is considered to be one of the causes. Now, another of the important controversy which we often face, and many of the times even Ayurvedic community would be suspecting or maybe having some questions like whether Rasaushadhi is producing the damage in the kidney or not. There is always some hype saying that a person who consumes Ayurvedic medicines may have a kidney injury. There are a few of the publications too, and interestingly all the publications are from India, that the incidence of the damage is mentioned. The blame is over the heavy metals and the mercury. Mercury is very often blamed as such. There are certain other aspects which we need to consider. Mercury was used extensively in the Western medicine till 1959. Up to very recently, 1959, they were very frequently used, and the mercurials were used as antibiotics, diuretics, analgesics, dental amalgam and so on. Most of these mercury prescriptions were mercury chloride, calomel, which is a inorganic form of the mercury. The dosages prescribed in those were very high. Now, this together had given a huge incidence of damage to the tissues, including renal damage. Of course, other organs also were damaged. And the mercurial toxicity was identified, and then there was a movement to avoid mercury in the medicines, and now there is a movement to avoid the mercury even in instruments related to medical profession. Even the BP apparatus, thermometers and mercury is to be avoided. So mercury-free medicine has become a fashion now. Now, in that highlight, when somebody has suggested that Rasaushadhis would have a mercury, and then naturally the people would say that the mercuries and heavy metals are toxic to the kidney. But the preparation of Rasaushadhis and the content of the metallic as well as the mercurial contents, they are in a pure inorganic form which the contemporary biomedicine would not be able to identify or separate, and their actions are totally different. Virtually, the amount of the mercury absorbed after giving a processed cadmium would be negligible, whereas if you give a mercuric sulfide directly, it will be absorbed very rapidly and then it will produce the damage to the tissues. This is what we have studied, and hence one important is Rasaushadhis which are prepared properly and they are administered with a specific indications would be harmless, and many of the renal failure patients, I am underlying about that part, many of the renal failure patients can be managed with these Rasaushadhis better than the other way. So I stress upon that part. And whenever the question comes in, suspicion comes in, and unfortunately most of the times the confusion comes from the Ayurvedic community. They do not have a faith on that. And another aberration is that many times many of our pharmacies, they claim that they use a chemically pure mercury or chemically pure substances. Chemically pure is not really the idea of the Shodhana or Ayurvedic medicines. Ayurvedic medicines, they need to have the natural ingredients which are natural impurities, rather natural impurities, and these natural impurities will help in homogenizing the substance. Biologically accessible form of the metal is used, and hence that protocol has to be followed. If you do not follow that protocol, of course, if you go for a so-called chemically pure metal and then metallic substances, and they are not used according to the specific dosage schedule and so on, over prescription, increased quantities, so on, they can harm. I don't say that Ayurvedic cautions or Ashwagandha cannot harm, but with the precautions, with the textual guidelines, it's not going to harm at all. That's what I have experienced, and I have patients who are taking Rasaushadhis for more than 30 years, and their kidney is much healthier than the majority of the population. Now, that's about the issues related to the etiology and the other factors. Now, the identification of these, stratifying the renal injuries would be, because the renal injuries are difficult to be identified, the issue is that renal injuries are stratified into categories like risk, injury, failure, and loss, or end-stage renal disorder. Or this indication is also named as rifle, R-I-F-L-E, rifle. The important is, in the initial phases, when the kidney is traumatized, that's what we call as risk phase, there will be no clinical symptoms, absolutely no clinical symptom. The glomerular filtration rate will be increased, that's important. All biological, biochemical values like creatinine would be within the normal limit as such, not very high, and that's what we call as a risk stage. Injury is where there is a tendency for the creatinine level to be slightly raised and glomerular filtration rate tends to get reduced as such. That will be the next stage. Failure, of course, where creatinine level would be more than 3 or so on, and the renal loss is where acute renal failure clinical symptoms, where the urinary output also may be affected, and a persistent, continuous reduced urinary excretion would be the stage, and of course end stage is where there is a total renal failure. And the renal failure, one of the other initial clinical signs of the renal failure is altered lipid metabolism. Dyslipidemia is one of the common, very commonly seen clinical sign in case of the initial renal failure, and that justifies the vodka being considered as a medo or soto mula. That's it. Now, another important issue, all that whatever we have discussed, that is related. I have said already, like, it is always difficult to identify a renal pathology in the early stage. Reason is simple, because the renal reserve is around 20 times. God has given you, God or who has created human being, has given about 20 times more than what is required about the kidney tissue. And that's why we can donate the kidney. We can live with only one kidney, and because we have a glomerular mass which is having a reserve of more than 20 times, till about 70% of the glomerular mass is damaged, or a glomerular filtration is reduced significantly, the all biochemical values look normal, and hence you will not be able to make out. Only after this critical stage is reached, the creatinine level tends to rise. And because of that, Sushruta has mentioned, when there is a prameha to be suspected, even if you find even a single trace of the prameha lakshanas, even if there is a slight increase in the urine, you have to consider that patient as a prameha. The other point is, nature has given you a bounty more than 20 times, and we say that now it has made the diagnosis of a renal pathology as difficult. Now we have to consider this, whether that bounty given excess is really a curse or a boon, whether it is to safeguard the human beings, or is it a curse where it makes difficult to diagnose. Now this is the one important point which you have to consider. Given God has given you more than 20 times what's required, and instead of preserving that, we are claiming that because we have a reserve, that it's difficult to identify the pathology as such. That's a paradoxical issue. Now anyway, that's the other part. Then in my approach for chronic renal failure conditions would be, what I would consider is a patient having creatinine level less than 8 milligram, we can try with our medicines. If it is more than 8 milligram, probably the patient needs a renal support, either it could be the dialysis or transplantation, etc. The most important part of the management in such conditions where we can manage would be diet and exercise, management of hypertension. These are the two important issues. Diet and exercise is very critical. If there is a need for managing the hypertension, you may need an antihypertensive drug of other category. Now, once these are managed, if the patient is fit, one of the treatment which can really produce the benefit would be Virecana. But if the patient is not fit, if the patient is already on dialysis, Virecana might not be an option. The other treatment which I prescribe would be usually Asanadikvata, Chandraprabha, Punarnamandora. With that, I can see that the patient would, though I will not say that the patient would be cured, there is no question of it. Cure once the patient has reached a chronic renal failure where the creatinine level already has reached a critical level, but it can be managed, patient can be managed as such. Even a patient who is on ongoing dialysis, by administering these medicines, the frequency of dialysis can be reduced in a good number of patients, and that's exactly what Sushruta has mentioned as the major line of the treatment. One is Vyayama Yogehi Vividehi, the Vyayama, and Samshodhana Ulekhana Landhanani. These are the major lines of the treatment for the Prameha as such. Now, the last point is about the incidence of the kidney transplants. They are increasing both globally as well as in India, and we claim that we have a very huge scientific progress. My question is whether failing to or not concerned about the nature's bounty and instead of safeguarding it and wasting that with all that diet and then all that the additions like maybe the preservatives added to the food, insecticides added to the food sources, the pollution in the environment, all these have increased the chances and the incidence of the renal disorders, where we can even ensure that 20 times more the reserve given by the nature has been destroyed, and we claim that we have achieved a lot by having a technique of kidney transplantation, and we are replacing that. Should it be considered as a real science or pseudoscience? So those questions, those who claim that are present either as pseudoscience, one of the questions to be asked is which is a real science. With this, I will come to the concluding point. The concluding is Ayurvedic literature has rich information about the physiology and pathology of the urinary tract. Healthy lifestyle is the key to healthy renal system, and effective management is possible in selective cases with Ayurvedic line of treatment. And the last point is real science is to preserve the nature's gift than to waste it and say that we can have some artificial or transplantation. With this, thank you for all.